We're here at Bodie right now with our cool looking hats on. Keep the sun off our face. I kind of feel a little bit like a cowboy here with this hat on, don't I?
I don't.
I want to show you around this cool ghost town. Arrested decay, which means it's not restored, but it's preserved from getting worse. Thanks for joining us. Hey, America's Parks. We are on our California road trip right now, and we are outside the town of Bridgeport, California, eastern side of the state. We are rolling into Bodie State Park. This is a ghost town, a preserved ghost town. I came here with my daughter back in 2009, and I'm sure there's a million videos on YouTube already of this pretty cool location. It was a historic town back in the late 1800s, mining for gold. So at its peak, it had about 10,000 people. So after you turn off 395, you're on a paved road for a portion of this drive out to the ghost town. But the last 3-mile stretch is a gravel dirt road. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it really, I think, sets the stage a little bit for going back in time. It would be quite a different story to drive up and see a paved road and neon lights and all those kind of things. You feel like you're going back to the late 1800s right now, as we're getting ready to see there it is. I see it off in the distance. Had a very notorious reputation for being a rough and tough, one of the roughest and toughest ghost towns. Well, actually it wasn't a ghost town back then, but one of the roughest and toughest towns here in California. All right, enough talking. Let's show you this neat location.
Bodie,
Thank you.
$16.
All right, so these were the little cable cars that will lower you down into the mine. It's pretty neat. Red Cloud Mine was demolished back in 1972. But there's a number of mines right here on this property. We'll try to show you a few of them. Let's go. So we're gonna head over now to the Methodist Church. They said they built 2 churches in the town, but this is the only one that is still standing at this time. 1882 construction. And actually the gentleman, Clinton, I think his name was one of the chief guys regarding the mining operation. He would actually come here on Sunday mornings and preach sermons. So as you can see, there's some wire prohibiting people from going inside the church, but still pretty neat looking inside. Let me give you a view. All right, so what do you think of the church?
Yeah, I was saying they did a lot of work to make a nice place to worship the Lord in those days. It obviously was a priority because out here you're not doing things just for the sake of doing them. You're doing because it's a purpose. So it's neat that they had that desire to put in an organ. How'd they get the organ here? Wow.
Up on the back side, you can see there's a frame, and up there was an oil painting of the 10 Commandments that was stolen.
Oh.
Thou shalt not steal. Wow, that's neat. Neat also too, even in some of the roughest outlaw areas of the world, you still had people that wanted to get together and practice a little bit of righteousness. That's good to see. So the post office was moved here back in 1879, and then it became DeChambeau's Hotel. If you look inside, you can actually see some mail slots on that side, and there's a bar, a little saloon here on the left-hand side.
This is the Boone Store and Warehouse. It was owned by Harvey Boone, built in 1879. Harvey Boone was a distant cousin of Daniel Boone. So we all know Daniel Boone, but it's neat. They have a lot of the old things inside there. It's kind of like a Little House version of, but in Northern California.
So 1877 to 1881 were kind of the heyday years for Bodie, but it did go into like the 1940s or so. This is from the 1920s, obviously past the big gold rush era. We have a gasoline station that was here. Again, 1920s or so at that point. 1892 was not a good year because 60 buildings burned to the ground in a fire that started in a nearby restaurant, but behind me is the old firehouse itself. So I mentioned a population of 10,000. Doing some further research, they said conservative might be more around 7,000 to 8,000 people here in its heyday. Also, it's interesting, and I'm trying to give you a lot of large panning shots, is all the buildings that you see, that only represents about 5% of the buildings that were here in historic Bodie.
So you heard about the fire that Randy was just speaking of. There was another fire in 1932, and the bank got taken in this fire. All that remains is the vault made of bricks. That was all that was left of it. And interestingly enough, even though that Bodie was known to be kind of the Wild West town, the bank was never robbed.
Also, I've got to show you a little flashback from 2009, 14 years ago, when Kill and I came here for the first time, staying right here in front of the vault. So we're on the tour right now of the stamp mill. It's an extra $6, but we have a tour guide taking us through, showing us some of the details. And what I just showed you right there is the superintendent's house right next to the mill, overlooking the entire town of Bodie. Stamp mill would run 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. And the goal of a stamp mill, just as it says, it's stamped. It would smash the quartz rocks to try to extract the gold and the silver.
Grates called grizzlies, and that was basically to filter out the small rocks from the big rocks. So if the rocks were too big, they wouldn't fit through the grizzly. So they would put them in a jaw crusher, so that would crush the rocks to the size that was small enough. So once the rock fell through these grizzlies, it would have gone to one of these, which is called a mortar box, crushing the ore inside of here. So kind of think of this as the container of where they were crushing the ore. So each one of these stamps weighs about 1,000 pounds. And this part is called the stem. Right here is called the boss. And this was the shoe. So this was the bottom part where that was crushing the ore.
So what do you say, this is 1,000 pounds?
Yeah.
All right, watch this. So they'd open these mines up with dynamite. You can see right here, that's when it got a little bit more advanced. They had some more powerful tools to bust holes in to create an opening to put the dynamite. In the old days, it was this and a man behind this with a hammer.
They were burning wood to make the steam power. But if you guys notice when you're coming in here, there's not really any trees out here. So they had to import all of the wood. So originally they would have had to import it using mule teams. And then eventually there was a railroad built, so they were importing it on the railroad. So the electricity was brought in as alternating current, because that was easier to transport long distances. And this generator would have converted that to direct current, which was more effective at powering the mill.
Shop right now, this is where they would repair a lot of the larger equipment instead of shipping it off. Look at this lathe. This thing is a huge lathe. And then you got a massive drill press right here. Look at the size of that. There's a smaller lathe right there. Pretty incredible operation. The gentleman said there were belts that were just moving out all over the place. You can even see grease marks that are splattered all over the ceiling. Pretty special to be back in this thing. This is cool.
once the ore was crushed to a fine enough powder, it would have gone through a screen like this. And you can see one of the screens right there. So this is a 40 mesh screen, so that means there's 40 holes per square inch. A worker would have scraped off the gold, silver, and mercury mixture, which is called amalgam. So they would have scraped it all off, and then they would have put it in a bucket, you know, maybe something like that, and they would have stored it in that safe right there.
So the mercury process would capture the majority of the gold, and then they'd bring the tailings down, and then they would capture more in these little sluice boxes, which were basically panning for gold. This is what the tailings would look like. Look how fine they would crush it in this stamp mill. And then actually there was more tailings in here, and they do, I think it was cyanide acid or something to even pull out more of the gold, and therefore you're down to only losing 5% of the gold.
Heat up the gold and silver until it was a red, molten, you know, liquid metal. So once the metal was hot and liquid enough, they would pour it into this thing right there, which is called a bar mold. So that's how they made the bars of gold and silver.
So now that was really cool. Normally this whole mining district area is closed off to the public, but we had one of the park officials give us a private tour through this area, and if they're doing it when you're here for $6, that is money well spent.
So this originally was a lodging, but it became the schoolhouse in 1879 after the original was burned down by a juvenile delinquent. So this was 1879, and the highest enrollment was actually 615 students at one time. So perhaps they went in shifts or maybe different days, but somehow they fit 615 students in this school. And it didn't close down until 1942.
Our next stop today is the town cemetery. It's just outside the village itself, up a hill. And this is just a reminder of not only do people die, as they always do, but people died at a more frequent rate back then, including young children, as you could tell by the caskets that were laid aside in the morgue. Very sad, but that's the way it was back then, especially in these mining towns. It was a hard life, hard life. So one of the most famous headstones is right here. This is William Bodie, and the town is B-O-D-I-E, but his original name was B-O-D-E. So with the historic town of Bodie behind us, we are signing off right now. Did you have a good time here?
Yeah, there's a lot of history here. So it's worth visiting and seeing just all the people's lives that were here, and walking around thinking about all the people that lived here.
Yeah, very fascinating. Learned a lot. Thanks for traveling with us. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to subscribe to America's Parks. You can tell I could use some water. And they do have, by the way, cold running water here, which is nice. Let's see, subscribe, we got that one in. And remember, always room for you on every national park adventure. You take care.